Hello and welcome to section 3.3, where we're going to discuss lipids. Our learning objectives here are to describe four major types of lipids, explain the role of fats in storing energy, differentiate between saturated and unsaturated fatty acids, describe phospholipids and their role in the cell, and define the basic structure of a steroid and some steroid functions, and explain how cholesterol helps maintain the plasma membrane's fluid nature. So we'll start off just discussing the lipids in general. They are nonpolar, and we've got a diverse group of compounds, and because they are nonpolar, they are going to be known to be hydrophobic, meaning that they fear water and therefore are insoluble in water, meaning we cannot dissolve them in the water. And within our lipids umbrella, we're going to include things like fats, oils, waxes, phospholipids, and steroids. But for overall function, we know that they will store energy for long-term use in the form of fats, and it provides insulation for our body, serves as building blocks for a lot of our hormones, and is an important constituent for our cellular membranes. So let's jump into a little bit more detail now and first discuss our fats and oils. These are created with two main components. We have our glycerol and then our fatty acids that are going to be linked with that glycerol, which we can see at the bottom over here. We've got our glycerol over here, and then we have three chains of fatty acids here, and we therefore are going to call it meaning three, triglyceride, or triacylglycerol, and through that process we'll have three water molecules released. Now let's take a closer look at those fatty acid tails. They can either be saturated or unsaturated. So when we say it's saturated, it means that we only have these single covalent bonds, and most of them are going to be liquid at room temperature. We say they're saturated because every single carbon that could have a hydrogen attached to it does as a single covalent bond form. Whereas when we look at unsaturated fatty acids, it means that there's going to be at least one covalent bond. And so we can see that in the center over here. Monounsaturated fats are going to have just one, whereas if we have more, then it would be polysaturated fat. Now, we are going to be able to store fats in specialized cells called adipocytes. And so we can refer to cells that come together like that as adipose tissue, and these fat globules within the cells will occupy most of it. So it tends to kind of even push the nucleus in that cell over to the side. Whereas in plants, we'll store this fat or oil in seeds, and then they'll use them as a source of energy during their seedling development. We also have trans fat, in which our hydrogen atoms are on two different planes. So you can see that the hydrogens are kind of opposite of one another here, and this type of fat has been used a lot within the food industry to make them into a semi-solid form, and this is a consistency that is desirable for the processed foods. Unfortunately, this is bad for our health, and when we have them in our diet, we increase our levels of LDL, or low density lipoproteins, which is also known as our bad cholesterol, that can lead to plaque being deposited in our arteries, which of course can then lead to atherosclerosis and heart disease. The next type we have our omega fatty acids, and this one in particular that we're looking at is an omega-3 fatty acid, and that is because we find a double bond within its third carbon. And it's nutritionally important for us because our body isn't able to make them. We can find them in things such as salmon, trout, and tuna, and they help us in the fact that it reduces the risk of sudden death from heart attacks by lowering our triglycerides in our blood, decreasing blood pressure, preventing thrombosis by inhibiting our blood clotting, and reducing inflammation. It may even help lower the risk of some cancers in animals. Another type are waxes, and these will cover some of the aquatic birds' feathers and some plants' leaf surfaces, like you can see pictured on the right-hand side. They do have a hydrophobic nature, which prevents the water from sticking on their surface. Our other type are phospholipids. Now we will bring up phospholipids quite a bit as we talk about our cells because they make up the plasma membrane bilayer. And you could see this pictured on the right hand side where we have two layers. So these are what we're soon going to talk about is the this is the hydrophilic part in the red here that are the modified phosphate groups, or also known as the phosphate head or hydrophilic head. And so you can see that on the outside of the cell as well as the side that is facing the inside of the cell, so that they're more in contact with the water because they are water loving. That's what hydrophilic means. And the other parts that you see in yellow here are the two fatty acid tails, which are going to face away from the water because they are hydrophobic. And lastly, we have to mention steroids. These have a fused ring structure and are hydrophobic and insoluble in water. All steroids are going to have these 4 linked carbon rings, and most of them do have a short chain tail that you could see pictured over here. And if they have a hydroxyl functional group, they're going to have an alcohol classification known as a sterol. So one of those will be cholesterol, and that is our most common steroid. We synthesize it within the liver, and it serves as a precursor for a lot of the steroid hormones we will make in our body, such as testosterone and estradiol that would be created from the testes or the ovaries, and they'll serve as precursors to things like vitamin D and bile salts. Bile salts, if you have heard of before, will help to emulsify fats, which will then be more easily absorbed by our cells.